Say very welcome to this press conference. We are very happy to welcome first the Minister of Health, Maria Larsson from the Swedish government, Antonio Maria Costa from UNODC, and Erwin Karinkowski from the US Drug Office. We are very pleased to have you as distinguished guests and distinguished speakers at this very important conference, which is the second one World Conference on Narcotic Drugs. I will start immediately to give the floor to Maria, please.
Thank you so much, and we really appreciate once again be the host of this conference. And I think it's necessary, of course, to have a very tight global cooperation in this kind of issues. Because, especially at this time, because there is, of course, a movement to legalize narcotic drugs. And you can see a lot of pro-drug message are spread worldwide. So we need to work a lot to build a political consensus. We need a tight cooperation between different countries and, of course, together with NGOs. They are so important in this work. We need to create a broad public support for a restrictive drug policy, and I think that we in Sweden perhaps have some experiences during the past decades that can be helpful also for other countries. It is about to reduce both the supply side and the demand side, of course, and we need to work both with prevention, with good treatment and care, and with a good control. The vision must be a drug-free society, and we have to work on that today. I think one good tool for that is this new report about the UN Convention on the Right of the Child. It can be useful in that perspective because this makes it very clear that children have a right to be protected against drugs according to the convention. And I would say it is not an option for states parties, it is an obligation to protect children from illicit drugs. So I'm very hopeful that this will be a useful conference for all participants. There are about 300 of them from 60 different countries. I'm very glad that for everyone of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Larsson. And then I would like to give the floor to Mr. Karinkowski, please.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute honor to be at the table with everyone here and to participate in the second forum. As you know, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks actually today, President Obama released his first national drug control strategy in Washington, D.C. I had an opportunity early on, I've now been in the office a little bit over a year. Early on, he asked me to take a blank sheet of paper and ask the American public what they wanted to see in a drug strategy, what they felt was important. And I did that. I very much took the President, the Vice President, and others' direction. And we traveled the United States and we spoke to law enforcement officials and judges. We spoke to prosecutors and defense attorneys. But just as importantly, we spoke to people that run prevention programs, people that run treatment programs. We spoke to a lot of young people. We also spoke probably as well as heard, we listened to all of these people. But we also had an opportunity to listen to many, many, many people who have been in drug treatment and recovery and have able to be back in their lives, controlling their lives, working to support their families, taking care of their children. And that's what's in President Obama's drug control strategy. The strategy essentially in the United States tells the large federal components, the Department of Justice, the Department of Health and Human Services, and others, what they must do to conform with the President's strategy, how their budget, how their actions should conform. But probably just as importantly, or perhaps more importantly, the National Drug Control Strategy is looked at in the United States by the 50 states, by the different cities and counties, as a roadmap or a blueprint for them in what they can be doing to deal with their drug problems. Also, throughout the country, throughout the world, the drug control strategy is often used for information that can be supportive. About 90% of the research done in drug treatment in the world is conducted in the United States and is done through the National Institute of Drug Abuse. We feel that in President Obama's strategy that it is a very balanced strategy, that it focuses as much on prevention and treatment as it focuses on interdiction and law enforcement. What is often not recognized but is clearly stressed in this strategy is that we've been very helpful in working with other countries when it comes to technology on interdiction and information sharing about transnational organized crime and drug smuggling. When it comes to methods of interdiction and detection, on and on and on, sharing of criminal intelligence information, all of that is very important. Just as importantly, we have a variety of other things that are helpful when we work with other countries. For instance, drug courts have been in existence for over 20 years in the United States. They've been well researched and can be quite effective. And we recently helped Mexico open up their first drug court in Monterrey. We've been working with a delegation from Russia who has been looking at drug courts in several cities in the United States. But then we have prevention programs, and the prevention programs that can be most effective are the ones that come from the grassroots level, the community level. It isn't something that's dictated from the national government. We can provide the science, the evidence, the research, and to be quite helpful in these prevention programs. But I think that what we really want to be able to do is to see these developed at the state and the local level, and I think that's where it's much more helpful. There's some issues in drugs in the United States that have not really caught the attention of the public. Marijuana and medical marijuana and the current ballot proposition in California about that will come before the voters about legalizing marijuana receives a huge amount of attention. What isn't receiving the amount of attention is that drug deaths are greater in the United States than gunshot wound deaths. What isn't receiving the attention is the fact that in at least 16 states, but I would think as the data comes in more than that, drug deaths are greater than car crash deaths. What isn't receiving the attention is the fact that prescription drugs are driving so many of these. So these are drugs not being smuggled across a border. These are drugs coming right out of medicine cabinets. The other thing that is important to recognize is that drug driving has not received the attention that alcohol-impaired driving has. And we have made great success, not that there isn't more that can be done, but we have made great success in the United States on reducing alcohol-impaired driving through education and enforcement. We have the same ability to reduce drug driving through those same methods. It's a great honor to be here with this group because the other thing that we clearly recognize is that this is a global problem. It is not just a problem in countries that have a higher GDP. It is not just in countries that have one particular demographic or ethnicity. It is truly a global problem. It's not a partisan problem in the United States. It's not a Democrat or a Republican issue. And it's not a class issue. It is a problem that affects everyone in our country. I had traveled many places over many months, and I did not find anyone who didn't say that a friend, a coworker, a family member, they had all been personally affected by drugs, whether they were a judge or whether they were somebody with a family member who had taken control of the problems in a household as a result of drugs. So we think that the drug control strategy it's produced by the president's staff, my office. We got to write it, but it is truly the voice of the American people. And it's a voice that says we have to look at this problem in a very balanced way. And only by understanding the complexities of drugs, ending the discussion about a war on drugs, and moving toward as much a public health as a public safety problem, do we have the potential to make progress. And only by doing so in a global initiative will we make progress. It isn't just a U.S. problem or a Mexico problem. It is truly one that affects the entire global population. And that's why I'm so pleased to be here today for this conference.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Kalkowski. And now I will give the floor to Dr. Costa, Secretary Director of the UNDC, please.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, obviously, and I thank the World Federation for the invitation. It is important to blend together representative of government, representative of international institutions, and especially the young people, part of the non-governmental institutions. This is the perfect blend, because unless we involve society at large, we will never be able to address properly the question of the drama of drugs worldwide. I welcome the topics on today's agenda. There is a thematic subject matter I care very much for, namely the question of cannabis, one of the most underrated and I'm afraid one of the most serious manifestation of drug addiction worldwide. So to understand better the threat posed by cannabis, the reason why we should be very concerned about it, the spreading of its use, it would be make an important contribution. So I thank this first agenda item as much as the second one, dealing with a geographical region, a part of the world, West Africa, that we detected already, well, back in 2004, 2005, was being under attack, was being attacked by drug traffickers from across the Atlantic, Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil. And that indeed has caused havoc in the region, has become a serious security threat, and is endangering even the stability of a number of nations there, Bissau, Conakry, and some of the other countries. And the third theme of this conference, of this forum, namely the proper environment to promote prevention to drug addiction, as well as to create a context whereby those who are affected, especially young people, can be detected earlier for their problems, namely the relation between parents or the relation within the families. The third theme, the family environment is crucial, especially to alert the parents of forthcoming problems among their children. So I'm glad again that this is of the discussion. Very briefly, in the statement this morning, I will elaborate on the global vision the United Nations has about dealing with the drug problem worldwide, and place the drug policy and drug control policies in a more general context, not only dealing with the question of the health-based treatment program and prevention program, which we needed to promote, but also to show how, especially in the developing world, the most affected part of the world now by drug cultivation, trafficking, and also abuse, how development can play a role. Because of the instability generated by drug trafficking, I will insist on the importance of promoting security so as to reduce the likelihood of drug trafficking to a certain weak part of the world, and therefore feeding our own markets. And finally, of course, I will deal with the question of human rights. So the fourth theme I will deal with in dealing with in summarizing the global view of the United Nations will be, as I said, health, development, security, and human rights. This is all I want to say.
Thank you very much, Dr. Costa. And now I will give the floor open for questions. Yes,
yes, I would like to ask about what happens with Mr. Kalkowski. What happens when they say yes in the referendum in California this autumn? If there will be a legalization of cannabis. What can happen?
There are two things that come up. One is that marijuana is still against the Federal Controlled Substances Act, which the Department of Justice enforces. The second part of this is that the Department of Justice is not going to speculate on what authorities and what action it would take, because this has not been passed by the voters. It has been voted on in California. and so they are not going to discuss something that would be mere speculation. So the Obama administration absolutely opposes legalization. It is a non-starter. It is not a subject of discussion. And we have given a number of speeches and put together a number of presentations, some in California, about all of the reasons why legalization does not make any sense. Anyone who reads that ballot proposition and sees and then begins to just scratch the surface of the false promises made in that proposition can clearly recognize that it's not going to solve the budget problems in a state the size of California. It is not going to reduce violence or the black market, and we certainly have a medical system in the country that reviews drugs in a very thorough way, and popular vote is not a part of that when it comes to medical marijuana.
Thank you. More questions, please? Sven?
Mr. Kulikowski. Hello.
Good.
Nice
Good to see you again.
In 32 weeks ago, 30 days ago, you don't mention the war against drugs anymore. What do you put instead?
I know that has been the hardest part of this job. Last May, when I interviewed with the Wall Street Journal, and I said, "Look, we should stop using it, talking about it as a war on drugs." People in the United States, and this is where it was given the direction with President Nixon when he talked about drugs being public enemy #1, etc. People in the United States didn't recognize, especially in minority communities, that it's not a war on them. No matter how much you would say it's a war on a product, people didn't understand that the war analogy always looks to force as an answer. And so ending the war and not discussing it as a war, but discussing it with the complexity that the drug problem deserves, seems to me to make sense. But then the reporter asked me that tough question about what are you going to say next? What's going to be the next bumper sticker? So when I traveled the country and I listened to people a lot, everyone understands that we're dealing with an incredibly difficult and complex public safety and public health problem. I actually firmly believe that the American public is ready for that level of discussion, that they don't need to see a bumper sticker that'll give them a quick and simple solution, or what we say in America, a silver bullet to the problem. That just doesn't exist. It's a public safety problem, a public health problem. It deserves attention. It deserves a balanced strategy of prevention and treatment and the criminal justice and programs to deal with it. So, but if anyone would like to give me some suggestions for a bumper sticker, I'm happy.
But at the same time, yes, you finished the drug and war in the U.S. At the same time, you have soldiers in Afghanistan and shooting and burning opium field, and you're working hard in Colombia and also supporting the president in Mexico, which are in fact having a war on drugs. Aren't you in the same view abroad?
No, I mean, I just disagree with that for a host of reasons. But the primary reason that when I look at Colombia, look, drugs are a nexus or a part of all of these issues, whether it's Afghanistan or whether it's in Colombia or whether it's in Mexico. But they are clearly not the only issues when it comes to terrorism, insurgency, who is going to run and rule those countries, whether it's going to be legitimate, democratically elected people, or whether it's going to be thugs and criminals and cartels. And I think the thing that always gets lost in this is that on the drug issue, these criminal enterprises, these transnational organized crime groups, are involved in the trafficking of human beings. They are involved in the trafficking of manufacture of pharmaceuticals that don't meet medical standards. They're involved in extortion, kidnapping, arson, the selling of protection. If the only thing that they were engaged in was drug trafficking, it might be easier to go forward with them. So that's really clearly what I believe to be the differences in a war. And maybe Mr. Costa wants to.
No, not really.
No.
You were very eloquent. I
Okay.
agree with what you said.
Totally.
Yes, Mr. Costa, now you are leaving the UNODC. When could we expect to have any information about your successor?
Oh, I give you the telephone number of the Secretary General of the United Nations. You ask him. It's his decision, not mine. Hopefully soon.
So after 8 years and now you're leaving the office, what would you say are the most pressing issues in this field looking forward?
Well, I'm not only, at least my office is not only in charge of drug control. Our mandate is triple. We can do drugs and crime and terrorism. I think the major accomplishment in the past few, I would say 24 months, the past couple of years, working 5-6 years to do so, is to recognize the links between these three areas of uncivil behavior. Drugs are very much part of the crime problem, which is very much what, and becomes also sort of funding of insurgency and terrorism. Now, I think we succeeded through the Security Council and the General Assembly, especially the Security Council, to convince member states that this is indeed the threat. Cannot be, each one of these three threats, drugs, crime, terror, cannot be addressed individually. If this momentum is maintained, I think it would be a success on our part, personally, perhaps on my own role in promoting this concept, and I would say is the right way to look at it.
Yes, please.
Yes, I would like to ask Mr. Karikowski one more question about marijuana, about the medical marijuana in the United States. There is, I think, 14 states today that has had this system. How do you work against that from the federal point of view?
The Attorney General issued some guidelines to the United States attorneys that operate or exist within those states that have medical marijuana laws. Quite frankly, the popular press took those to say that these guidelines mean a hands-off approach by the federal government, etc. Just reading the 2.5 pages of guidelines which were needed and which were appropriate, it very clearly is not a hands-off approach. It says that any of these individuals in the medical marijuana that are operating outside of the state law, that are involved in for-profit enterprises, that are involved in selling to youth or children, that are involved in any type of violence, that the federal government has complete authority and continues to prosecute, and they have brought prosecutions forward on this. And we've had medical marijuana laws since 1996, so there's some experience. The pushback has been very interesting, particularly within the last year, where, for instance, the city of Los Angeles has now sent notices to literally hundreds of dispensaries, ordering them to close, to not operate any longer. The state of Colorado, which recently passed similar laws, is now passing a series of laws to bring under much stricter control the proposition or the initiative that was passed within that state. So I think that's where the federal government is on the medical marijuana issue. The states seem to be taking this on, and especially at the local level, quite forcefully.
You mean there is good hope that has come to a sort of turning point? There will be no more states than these 14?
It's very interesting because in those states in the West, you can have what's called these voter initiatives, and as long as you get signatures, and oftentimes you can pay for the signatures of voters, you can get a lot of things on the ballot. And we have seen many odd things that have been voted on in different states. Other states don't operate in a similar fashion, so it becomes kind of the complexities of federalism that created the medical marijuana. I think as you see more of the problems associated with these so-called dispensaries, that we see more of the states actually taking the control and using their legitimate state authority to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we have to, maybe find the last question, a short one, if there is anything. Otherwise we have to close this. Mr.
Carlson, what can NGO do in this situation? Drugs, threats, instability in Africa, medical marijuana and coffee shops now even in Washington DC reopen. What can NGO do?
We are a part of the civil society, and I think the civil society can and has to play a very important role in this matter. To mobilize, to get people aware of the problem, and especially the politicians to know about the problem, the extent of the problem. We can mobilize the civil society, we can involve individuals and NGOs and put pressure so we at the end will have a good policy outcome. That's our role, I think. And this conference is an excellent example where we bring together people from the civil society together with people from the authorities and also agencies.
Is the risk that it's only for a show and then that you go home and
No, I don't think so, because the first World Forum Against Drugs took place here in Stockholm 2008. The outcome of that conference that we established the NGO, World Federation Against Drugs, with a board with international composition. And this is the second World Forum, and there will be, I can assure you, a third World Forum conference, not in Sweden this time, maybe in South America, which we are planning for. Thank you everyone for coming.